Welcome back to another episode of World Travel Made Easy with Itinerary Boss. This week, I'm excited to have Niamh McAnally on. She is the writer on the water. I got connected to her from our previous guest, Paul Thornton, from the Joy of Cruising podcast. And she's also a best-selling author from Following the Sunshine, Flares Up, Stories of a Place, which she'll be able to give you a lot more detail on those throughout the episode. And as you can see in the back, she has a couple of those books. So really excited to bring her on. How's it going today?
Great. Thank you, Ross. Lovely to be with you.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining. And don't want to, sell you short. Obviously, you have a lot that you're going to bring to the table today on today's episode. But I guess what can listeners and the audience expect to hear from you today?
Well, I think today we should talk about travel in general. Do you know what I mean? And also a part of what I did in traveling around the world as a volunteer and how you can get to places that you might not normally get to if you go as a tourist, those kind of ideas, and just to think bigger than ourselves.
Yeah, yeah, and I know I'm excited to learn a little bit more, and I know the audience will be as well. Um, I guess from like, could you give a little more background just on, you've written a couple books, as well as I know when we were talking prior, you were going on some different cruises, and obviously we got connected through Paul, who has a cruising podcast. Like a little bit more about your background, just so the audience knows a little bit more.
Sure. I'm from Ireland originally, and I grew up in a theatrical family. Both my parents were actors, and kind of as a natural progression, growing up in a theatrical background, I ended up working as an actor initially in theater, and then moved from there into television direction. So I was kind of always in the entertainment industry, and one of the things that taught me was that change is inevitable and that we keep having these opportunities right throughout our lives to kind of reinvent ourselves. And that made it very easy for me as I changed careers. I think I've had 5 careers over 5 different industries now, but I've settled completely into writing. That's where my passion is, and that's what I'm doing for the hopefully for the rest of my life now. And so that background really helped me see that there was bigger places outside of Ireland because Ireland is, as you know, is a beautiful country, but a smaller country. And so I always joke that, when you're born in Ireland, you're born with one passport in one hand and a backpack in the other.
Yeah, no, I got the chance to that's very, very interesting. I appreciate you providing that background. I got the chance to study abroad in Ireland, and yeah, it was an amazing experience. And it's cool to hear your background and in the fight, and like you said, and we're gonna get more of this in the episode, but just all of those different creative environments, having those different experiences has helped influence where you're at today. And it sounds like it's been a fun but long journey, and you want to keep you've kind of found that this is what I love to do, and I want to stick with that. So I would love to hear a little bit just more about, right, before you became an author. Like, can you walk us through what the progression of career path looked like?
Yeah, absolutely. The initial one, like I was working in television, and in Ireland, and I also one of my passions is anything to do with the ocean. So I trained to be a scuba instructor, and then started traveling with that. We did a couple of volunteer projects in Belize for their National Marine Sanctuary as they were setting it up, and then I ended up in the Florida Keys where I was teaching scuba and underwater naturalism, that kind of thing. And shortly a couple of years into that, I realized, oh, I'm living in America now. I need a job with health insurance and benefits. So I moved from that into the hotel industry. And I started out with the Sheraton in Key Largo, which is now, it's actually changed flag now, and then traveled around and ended up in California, also working with hotels, and finally ended up in an island called Sark in the UK Channel Islands, and I was managing a hotel on Sark, this beautiful island, which is only accessible by ferry. There's no airport, no roads, and there's no cars. So absolutely idyllic. And I was managing hotels there. And then towards the end of, I want to say it was 2014, the owners decided they weren't going to open the hotels in 2015. And that's when I took off and started volunteer traveling around the world. And then that led into this new phase of my life.
That's awesome. No, that's a very, and I know when we were talking, you telling me about that progression was pretty inspiring. And then it brought everything together to understand
Mhm.
how did you get from, like you were talking about, doing television in Ireland to then here, where you've written multiple books,
Mhm.
and just hearing that path. And I'm sure you've had so many different experiences that our listeners can learn from. And I know when we were laughing too in our when we were talking when we first met that you're in the Florida in Florida now, not in the Midwest, because obviously if you were doing cruising and working in that industry, that'd be tough to get around. So would love to hear a little bit more about, like, we heard progression of how you got there, but then today, what all do you have going on, and what are you doing?
Well, today I'm actually working on a new launch for the next book coming out, which is Stories of Place. And back in 2020, when everybody was in lockdown, I did a couple of courses with Curtis Brown Creative out of the UK and met a number of talented writers on that course and decided it was time to try and keep us all together afterwards as we were working through our books. At the time, I was writing Flares Up. And we've been meeting monthly ever since. And in 2023, we were spread out all over the world. Australia, one girl was in Japan at the time, had come from Albania. There was a couple of people in England and somebody in Ireland, and then I was in the States. And so it was a little bit of a jiggle to try and get Zoom meetings like with that kind of time zone spread. But we've managed to do it now for the last 5 years. We've met every month online. And in 2023, we brought everybody together in an in-person writers retreat in the UK. And while we were there, we said, it would be lovely if we could do some collaboration and do a collective piece. So that's what Stories of Place is. It's a combination. It's under, I would consider it literary category in terms of literary fiction, but it's a combination of all of our writing stories and very eclectic styles. And the one thing that ties us all together is I'm not sure how many of your listeners are familiar with what three words. And this was designed by two guys in the UK who were concert promoters, and they were finding difficulty getting bands to the exact location they needed. Could you imagine saying, "Oh, I'll meet you at Wembley Stadium"? It's like, where exactly in
Yeah.
Wembley Stadium are you going to be? So they got with two tech guys and they actually mapped out the entire globe, the entire planet in 3 by 3 meter squares. And they gave each one of them a three-word address. And this has been adopted now in some of the vehicles. There's countries who have adopted it as their postal system because they don't have streets like I think Tonga and I know Cote d'Ivoire has adopted it as their postal. And so we thought, well, that would be a great idea. We would pull all our stories together with this concept. And the subtitle of the book, it's Stories of Place, Zinc Level Blindfold. And when somebody goes to the What Three Words app and they type in zinc level blindfold, they'll find the exact spot where we were all sitting together when we came up with the idea. And then in each story, it has a three-word address, and the reader can either look at those words up, or they can read it, and then the setting will give them an idea of, where the story takes place. So that's what I'm working on now. That comes out in April, and we've just got our pro. You can see there behind me, I've got one of our early editions, one of the advanced reader copies, and we're all collaborating at the moment, working together to get that released in April.
That's awesome. That's honestly one of my favorite parts about doing this show is getting to interview people like you and just hearing how that came about. I would have had no idea about, right, the three word address. And I mean, that's when I think about it too. I mean, that's a real world problem of when you
Mhm.
see all these people just from a concert standpoint, they're touring, they're at a different place throughout the year. So it's like, I'm just tired, first off, looking at how they're doing that, but then being able to take that and create a system, that's amazing. And I think it's very interesting and cool that you all implemented that into your book, and it's now showing, like, we took this process and strategy, and now each different story that we have is also going to have one. It's I need to order a book. Is it what it
Yeah,
sounds
there you
like?
go. There you go. Yeah, and the promoters are the guys who designed this. I mean, they're spreading the word more and more. But what we have found is they've actually found kayakers lost at sea. They have found people like, hiking off the beaten trail, which is a lot easier than, let's say, trying to figure out what your GPS coordinates are. And they're easy. And the other thing is there's 57 trillion of these squares mapped out around the world and not one repetition of any of those three words. And I think they don't use words that could be spelled in different ways. So, like one of the stories I have in the book is called "Timing Part Waters." And you know what I mean. So I do that, and you type that in, and you will come up with the exact like square where that story is set. It's very, very interesting.
That is. All right. I got to get the book. Where can I pre-order it is the
So,
question.
yeah, pre-ordering is great. And for anybody listening, pre-orders are fantastic for authors because what happens is the algorithm in Amazon sees the pre-orders and then they see, okay, this book has started to take off. So it's very important for people to pre-order books for us. We love when they do. So yes, it's available on Amazon for pre-order. It's also available from the publisher Black Rose Writing, who are based in Texas.
Okay. No, that's helpful. And listeners, we'll make sure to share those links
Sure.
within the show notes. That way it's just easier for you to go click and go directly there. And I can say, I mean, I actually do something on LinkedIn and that I just share every month, but that I've just started last year where I was like, I'm reading a book of the month. I'm also, right, I'm listening to an audio book. So I'm sharing that and like
Mhm.
lessons learned. But it is kind of funny. The past two or three books that I've ordered, I've pre-ordered them because I heard them on a podcast and like, and I love the story, but they ended up being some of the best books that I read, to be
Oh,
honest.
that's
So
brilliant.
yeah, so
That's
it
yeah,
was,
that's
I just,
great.
yeah, so, and that's not me just trying to sell for, for you. It's,
Yeah, yeah,
but it is
exactly.
very
Yeah.
true. Like that's good to know just from a consumer standpoint, because I had no idea personally. So yeah, thank you for
Yeah.
sharing that.
No, good. And one of the brilliant things about this, like normally when you've got one author and you're doing your book launch on the day of, ours is coming out on 10th of April of 2025. But what we're going to do is we're all going to hold our own launches around the world on the same day. And the launch invitations will be the what three words address
That
of that venue. So that's kind of really cool. It's going to tie it all together. So it's going to be a big event.
That's very cool. Do you have, are there any in, are they all like all over the world? Are there any specific in the
There's
States? Do you know?
There'll be yeah, the one in the States, believe it or not, is me, and that'll be in Florida, in the Punta Gorda Library in Florida. There's one author in Melbourne, Australia, another one in Perth, Australia. There's one UK author who will actually be in Barbados at the time, so she's going to run her launch there. There'll be quite a few in London, and then there's another one in Ireland. So
Okay.
it's really is spread across those areas, and so it's available all over. It's like Australia, Amazon.com, Booktopia, all the Amazons across the world will have it as well.
Okay. Okay. Good to know. Well, it sounds like you've also written a couple other books that we can see in the background, but obviously you did those and you usually when you probably write a book the first time, like the strategy that you have now from Stories in Place, like I can already tell you that if I were to try that the first time, it would not be that good. So would love to just hear a little bit more about, what Falling Sunshine's about, Flares Up, and then also just what were maybe some lessons learned that you took away from that and like just feedback you got from the audience and how that helped you grow? I know that's a loaded question, but just from a progression path, it's helpful just to kind of hear. I love hearing the stories.
Certainly. The first book, actually, believe it or not, I was writing Following Sunshine first. I started that in 2016, and that's actually my story. And it's a little bit about the background of growing up in Ireland, various different challenges I was facing at the time. And then it takes that year that I volunteered, traveled around the world. What I really wanted to do was start in one position and come all the way around the world and come back to it, which is I started in London and I traveled west and mostly down through the South Pacific Islands and then up through Palau and back through Asia and back to London. And then the final part of that story is what happens when I take on one final project to crew for a solo sailor to bring the boat from Florida to the Bahamas. And that part of that story changed my life. But what happened at the end of that period of time, we were in Antigua on a sailboat, and these two guys had just arrived having rowed a 20-foot wooden rowboat across the Atlantic Ocean from the Canary Islands. And we went out to see them on the as they came ashore. And the moment they go through this, it was actually called the Talisker Whisky Atlantic Challenge at the time. It's now called the world's toughest row. And when they cross through the green and red markers marking the channel, they tell them, okay, well, this is your Olympic podium moment. Stand up, light your handheld flares, and they take the pictures. And the front cover flares up is the photograph I took of them in that moment. And I was so connected to them. I'd never met these people. And we invited them onto our sailboat for the following night for their home cooked meal. And I showed them that photograph. And the guy who's in the picture facing us in the rowboat, he said to me, Niamh, that has summed up not just the 70 days, 70 days we spent at sea, but the 4 year struggle it took us to get to the starting line. And we talked about my writing their story. And I said, I'll write it on one condition, that it's not about how to row an ocean, because that's like one chapter. You went like rowed, pulled and pulled for like 70 days. So I said, but if you're willing to dig deep emotionally and spiritually and psychologically as to why you did it, how it affected your families, and then how the experience has changed you as human beings when you've had time to reflect on it. I said, that's the story, and that's what we wrote. And so that came out. And then I thought, okay, right then we got hit with COVID. And I said, I'm going to go back and look at Following Sunshine again. And I ended up rewriting the end of it through the end of COVID. And it brought us up to that moment where we took that photograph. So it kind of has ended up as a prequel to Flares Up, but it was written first, believe it or not.
That's amazing. That's
Yeah.
that's just so cool that you were there, you saw it, and then you took that picture, and it wasn't just like it was in the moment, and then you didn't even know the guys, and then you wrote the book. I mean,
Mhm.
I mean, the story itself, just going across in that boat is, I can't even imagine. I mean, that's I just think like you're out on a lake or sometimes an ocean and you're in a
Right.
large boat and you're getting, right, waves, you're getting and all of that. And that's like you're near shore that you can see. I can't even imagine going across the Atlantic in that and then surviving one. And
Right. And that was one of the reasons it drew me to the story was I'm backtracking a little bit now, the final part of Following Sunshine. After I had done that year of volunteer traveling, I took on this project, like I said, to bring a solo sailor and crew his boat for 1 month. And that turned out literally the moment that changed my life completely. And it's why I've been able to write for the last 9 years. So the person I met on the boat, who was the captain, was Gary Krieger, who I can now tell you at the time we were on a boat. There's no cell phone service. There was no Wi-Fi. And we're working all day, sailing and that. And then in the evenings, if we were on anchor, because there was no distractions, we had all this time to talk and to get to know each other on a very profound level. And we found we had such a tight bond. And then that blossomed into a romance. And there's a line in Following Sunshine where we say, yeah, Gary, I learned two things about him. One, he was allergic to pecans and relationships. And so and so, neither of us were looking for love, but it was just like love found us and put us together. And about 4 years into sailing all the way up and down the Caribbean chain and the Bahamas, I think it was 2019 on the deck of the boat, which was called Freed Spirit, which was very much kind of the epitome of both of us. He proposed. And then the following year was 2020, and we ended up with a wedding in Antigua on the beach. We did our legal service there, but then our main wedding was postponed for a year and a half, actually, because of COVID. But that's the point where my life changed in a heartbeat. And I think that's one thing that I always try and share with people is if you're open, we I had no preconceived ideas. I knew at this stage in my life that, there was a possibility that love was still out there for me, but I had stopped kind of assuming how it would show up. And we're very different people. He's from Los Angeles, I'm from Ireland, very different backgrounds growing up. And yet the commonality you can find in somebody with who has the same values, same moral code as you, and same dreams and hopes. And he was into traveling as well, and also, living on the water for both of us was a huge draw, and that connected us. But we made one trip from Bahamas down on the open ocean down to Puerto Rico to get to the Caribbean, and that was 9 days at sea in a 40-foot boat. And it was what I'm going to call less than ideal weather conditions. And it was not pretty. And so when I saw the guys who'd rowed in a 20-foot rowboat, I went, A, never, never going to do that. But B, I had such like respect and awe about how they did it. I said I was so connected, and that's why I was so passionate about it. And one thing every writer will tell you if you're starting to write your memoir or a book or a fiction, you've really got to be passionate about the story and really feel compelled to write it, not just, oh, I'd like to write it, because it's a long process. For me, a book takes about a year to write, another 6 months to edit and, get the rewrites done. And then, so it's about if you were to start from day one, if I start a new book today, it'd be at least 2 years before it'd be on a bookshelf, So if you're not in love with the story you're trying to write, and have a compelling reason for somebody else to read it, you're not going to stay with it. By the middle of it, you get bored and you start something else.
Yeah.
So like to this day, this book it like flares up, just still gives me goosebumps when I
Yeah.
when I think about those guys out there. Yeah.
I can't tell you're passionate at all.
Yeah, I'm very, very low key, huh?
No, but I love it. I mean, that's when we first got the chance to meet after Paul connected us, like our original call, I could just tell and like I learned a ton from it, but just those stories and hearing your story of, you just went and you had that and it just happened organically, right? You weren't out there looking for this, and that's I think that's the beauty of travel is, right, whether you're doing that through a cruise, whether you're doing it, everyone has their own different, some people may want to go sit on a beach. Some may want to have a
Mhm.
fully baked itinerary. Some may just want to go fly by the seat of their pants and figure it out when they get there. But I think it's understanding, and that's what I try to help people with who are busy professionals. And they're like, I don't have a ton of time. It's like, well, first figure out what you like. And then from there, go do that. And then you'll learn over time. And that's why I like to ask that question around your journey, because it didn't just start with, hey, I have these 3 books on the shelf behind me that have been these amazing stories. It's like, no, you took that leap of faith and you started to really travel around and over time, right? Like, and I think something that you also said too, where it was like, we didn't have any notifications on our phone. There were no distractions. It was just that time where we got to know each other and we realized like, hey, this is something that's very real.
Mhm.
And I think that's one of the challenges that I see nowadays is everyone's just like, where's the next hotspot on social media?
Mhm.
Where's
Mhm.
this? And it's really just starting somewhere like you did. And
Mhm.
then, years later, here we are having this conversation but it is cool to hear about how long those books take. And it is,
Mhm.
you do need to be passionate because the stories that you're saying, we could sit here and talk for hours and you could go more and more in detail, but that's why you wrote the books. You want,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
that's what's built out in the book. So no, I appreciate you sharing that. I personally found it really exciting and passionate after our first conversation, but yeah, wanted the audience and listeners to hear that. It would be good just to hear. I mean, I know you talked through at a high level, like here was when it started, kind of what it did, but were there any other like impacts that you feel like it had on you, whether it was volunteer work, whether it was, that time with Gary on the boat, whether it was just anything else throughout your journey that's kind of had an impact on you, whether it's personally or professionally?
Yes, the whole concept of travel is a very wide net, if you like, and you just made reference there to the people is like, if people are still working and they've got like 5 days off, or you know what I mean, or maybe
Yeah.
only 2 weeks, and I think it's very important for people to figure out what it is they want to achieve. What are they open for, and like you said, some people living on a beach. I mean, I've nothing against lying on the beach myself. I think I did it in Bulgaria one year when I was supposed to be going around seeing the cultural sites, and I spent the week living on the beach. One of the things that I've written a piece for Authority magazine actually called Five Habits You Should Develop in Order to Make Travel an Opportunity for Personal Growth. And these kind of developed with me over time, enjoying the traveling experience. And number one is curiosity. If you're curious and what is it you want to see, what is it you want to achieve, what do you want your trip to be about? And the next one I would put in there is adaptability. And we know that travel can go wrong. We know you can sit in an airport. We know that you can miss a train. So being adaptable and for me, a lot of times it's like, okay, there's some kind of like, where's the gift in this? What new thing's going to develop because I'm sitting in an airport, for instance. And sometimes that's difficult to reach for. And then I say, okay, well, if I can't find the gift, let me look for the lesson. Like, should I have left an extra hour early? That kind of thing. Did I pick a bad travel weather day? But yeah, and it could be anywhere around the world in a country. Like one time I was in Kenya and my mum died in Ireland. And I was trying to get back for the funeral or get back before the funeral. And there was the I was in an airport called Malindi down near on the Watamu coast, and the plane that was supposed to take us to Nairobi, the wheel was broken, right? So it wasn't exactly a very big airport, so they didn't have a spare wheel. And I thought, I'm going to miss my connection to Nairobi, to London, to Dublin. And I thought, I kept trying to think, you have to think outside the box, as for want of a better phrase. And I went over to there was an aviation school and private flights. And I said, is there any way you can get me to, I was thinking, I can't afford one of those anyway. And there was another couple maybe. But between the three of us, we still couldn't afford the flight. So I go back over and I'm passing by this guy who's in a white shirt with lapels and he's getting out of his car. I said, are you a pilot? And he goes, yeah. And I'm tugging on his sleeve like a 5-year-old. My mummy died. Can you take me to Nairobi? Right. And it turned out he came back to me and he said, there's a plane coming with the spare wheel and the mechanic is going to fix the wheel. I said, okay, great. And he goes, but you'll miss your flight. He said, you should get on that flight. It's going to pick up passengers in Mombasa and then on to Kenya or to Nairobi. And I'm like, but Mombasa's the wrong direction. He says, but it's your best shot. So I kind of really had to open my mind and rethink the thing. And sure enough, we jumped on that plane. It was just me on the plane going down to get the passengers in Mombasa, and I made it home in time for my mom's funeral.
Oh, that's
Now,
awesome.
you know what I mean? Those are the
Yeah.
kind of things that we look out for. The other thing in traveling, I recommend, although at the moment it's quite difficult because we're speaking on cruise ships, but one of the things is to travel as lightly as you can, and that art of minimalism. Like the year I traveled around the world, I had one backpack, that was it. And I lived out of it for 12 months, which was fine. But now we travel and we speak on cruise ships. And so it's like, okay, where's the tripod? Where's the
Yeah.
cameras? Where's the laptops? And we look like people in the old days, like going on with the steamer trunks trying to get on the ship, but it works. So you got to allow yourself some wiggle room there. And then the final habit I like to talk about is gratitude. And it kind of ties it all up, You're sitting in that airport in Malindi, and then suddenly this angel appears, and you're so grateful for the opportunity. And especially when all the travels I did in the South Pacific, in the smaller islands where you economically probably have more than they do. And what I've learned is some of the families I stayed with, that kind of melted away when you get down to the crux of who a human being is. And we're all very much the same at the core level, and I think travel does open your mind to that. And you realize, you know what? We all want to be loved. We all want to love somebody, our families, our friends, or our partners. And we all want to feel that we make a difference from being here and that we leave the world a little bit better off than it was when we came in.
Well said. That was that. I mean, the five habits and just takeaways that I love that. And I mean, I want to unpack that a little bit. I think, and that's what you learn too over time.
Mhm.
It doesn't happen right off the bat. First, it's just getting started and saying, "Hey, I'm curious. I want to go here."
Mhm.
And I'm in the same boat as you. I think my LinkedIn headline background is "Where will your curiosity take you today?" And it's just
Mhm.
like
I love that.
always asking questions, right? Just
Mhm.
even if it's something that you're like, oh, that's kind of interesting, and just like talking to different people because everyone has a different story. Everyone can bring some sort
Mhm.
of value, and it's always good just to learn because you'll take those lessons and they do compound, right? It doesn't,
Mhm.
and making sure that gratitude, I think that's also very important
Mhm.
because, and that's something that over the years I've kept up here because I'm like, oh yeah, this is great, this is helpful, but like jokingly, my mom got me a travel journal for Christmas, and now I have that. Now I have this. It's called the Full Focus Planner by Michael Hyatt. It's pretty cool.
Okay.
It has like a daily big three, weekly big three, but then it's like, what are you grateful for?
Mhm.
What else? Self care, best thing today. So it's like little things like that that like
Mhm.
then because a lot of people are like, okay, I got this to-do list. I'm going to get it done. And then
Mhm.
great. And I'm going to reflect, but hey, I had a good week. It's better to write
Mhm.
it down.
Mhm.
And with travel too, it's like, what did I learn? What adversity, like you said, there's always adversity. So you sharing that story of how you're able to figure out a strategic outside the box way to get back to one of the most important things, right, in your
Mhm.
lifetime. Like that's amazing. And I think when people go, they don't realize until they get there that you could plan it 100%
Mhm.
perfect, but when you get there, something's going to go wrong. And you're and all of the memories from the group trips, couples trips, whatever, like we laugh about that because sometimes
Mhm.
those are the funniest things. You're like, how did I end up in this situation? And you
Yeah.
just like have to shrug it off sometimes. And there's so
Yeah.
many of those, but those are the type of things if you go with that curiosity, if you're gonna be able to adapt, if you're gonna be able to give gratitude, and also just think about like I'm stressing over this small thing, and someone over here is happy to get food, or
Right.
they're they're having just a day where they're just sowing something, or they're literally just
Mhm.
going out into the field and getting food, and they're
Mhm.
happier than like you said. So I think
Mhm.
it's those are all really good points that I completely agree with, and they may not all hit when you first start traveling, but the compounding effect over years and years, like that's one of my goals is to help people understand like this is what happens. And if you start to take these different types of trips, like you said, sometimes it's not laying on the beach. I'm not an all-inclusive person. I'm
Mhm.
more I want to go to the different cultures and learn from those and take pieces back and try all the different foods, whatever it is. Because
Mhm.
then you actually get to learn the culture. And that's probably one of the best parts about travel. And then over that time, you learn, I like this, I don't like this. And then it just helps you form those upcoming trips. And then, maybe you're here 10 years later and you're having discussions like this. So it's, no, all really good points. And I could not agree more.
Yeah, and I think one of the things about gratitude, people think, oh, it's too big. Like, what could I possibly be grateful for today? And so let's go back to sitting in the airport. One of the things I try and do is break it down into tiny bite-sized pieces. And I'm thinking, well, okay, yeah, I got to wait 2 hours or whatever. I'm really grateful for the guy who built this seat.
Yeah.
Giving me an opportunity. I'm really grateful for the pilot who showed up to work today. Maybe they've got something, not helpful going on in their lives, but they still, put on their uniform and came to work. So I think once you break it down to the little size and get it rather than the big picture, it can be in like one human being at a time. And I think that helps ground you a little bit. And the other thing you're talking about, like we didn't expect it, things will go wrong per se, but it's like things will definitely go differently.
Mhm.
And one of the things one of my passions in life as well, or one of my missions every day is I've got to make somebody laugh every day. And I have a thing called the laugh list. And at the end of the day, I go through the funny things during the day, or what did I hit the laugh list? Did I actually make somebody laugh today? And the beauty of that mission is I can never fail because by the end of the night, I turn around and make myself laugh about something ridiculous. Do you know what I mean? Or how I showed up instead of, how I should have showed up, that kind of thing. I had a classic example the other day. I'm in one of these social networking groups here in Florida, and I'm trying, it's difficult when somebody brand new, and I'm a little bit more outgoing in big groups like that. And I kind of go, oh, hi, I'm Niamh, nice to meet you. And this lady turned around to me and goes, yeah, we met last week. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm so embarrassed, right? And I was telling that story at a dinner the other night, right? And then everybody started laughing. This girl looks at me, she goes, yeah, that was me. This is the third time, you know? So it's like,
Uh,
it's funny. It's really funny.
That's funny. Well, you can add me to the list for
There we
for
go. Well,
today.
my work is done. I'm out of
Yeah,
here.
there you go. No, but I mean, that's
Yeah.
true. I love, and that's one of my favorite parts about doing these shows is I always learn something from my guests, and it's kind of funny each day that I do one. Usually, it's like, what was the best thing about my day? Usually, it's a
Mhm.
podcast episode because they're
Mhm.
fun. I learn something, we laugh, right? And if you do
Mhm.
something stupid, then you can laugh about it, and
Mhm.
that's that.
Exactly.
And yeah,
Exactly. Yeah. What is it they say? Uh, angels travel through the world because they take themselves lightly, or some expression like that. So,
I'll
yeah,
have to look that
you
up.
can't take yourself too seriously.
No, no, not at all. So I know you talked about this a little bit, so I know when we were talking, it's pretty cool what you're doing now. So I mean, you talked about the camera, the tripod, right?
Mhm.
And I was wondering, like, when we got connected, okay, how did Paul connect me with you? And so would love to hear a little bit more about what you're doing now and just, yeah, all about it.
Sure. So I got connected with Paul through his podcast, The Joy of Cruising. And now Gary and I are both guest speakers on celebrity cruise ships. And it's a perfect marriage for us in terms of we're on the water, we're on the cruise ships, and we have a different captain who has to worry about the weather. We've got somebody else, like I'm not galley slave anymore, somebody else doing all the meals, somebody making our bed, doing the laundry and everything. It's just idyllic. And it also gives us an opportunity to travel and see some more places. And so we do on the sea days while we're on the ships, we give talks. They have with Celebrity Cruise, they have a thing called Beyond the Podium, and they have wonderful speakers. Sometimes it's an astronomer. We've had people speaking about glaciers, aviation, and we give talks. Ours are more storytelling, more entertainment based. But for instance, we do the whole backstory of Flares Up, and we have some videos, and we show people that, and they love seeing that story, especially when I do those ones on the transatlantic, because I say, well, look out the window, and can you imagine a little 20-foot boat out there? Um, yeah, so we and the other thing is, which slightly unique, we're I think one of the only couples that are actually on stage together. So we're a duo team, and people love the banter, because we kind of don't take each other seriously when we're on stage as well. So that's a lot of fun, and we've got the rest of the year mapped out now as the different cruises we're on. So I have a newsletter that I send out every month to by people on my newsletter. So we give them the option like, oh, okay, this is where we're going to be. Here's all the ports we're going to be in. So, if you want to come on the same cruise, and it's wonderful. We absolutely love it.
Very cool. Where now that's I mean, it sounds like a fun back half of the year. What are there any specific destinations? Because I know like and personally, and the reason I'm asking this question, I haven't been on a cruise, and after I had Paul's episode, after I talked to you, I'm like, okay, this is something that I need to try. But are there specific destinations? Because some of my audience they do want to go on cruises. It'd be good just to hear maybe because I'm from Charlotte, right? Most will go out of Florida. Any like
Mhm.
Caribbean, that area, and then maybe if we're talking Europe or Asia or just any others that people may not be thinking about, would be great to hear a little bit more about.
Yes, certainly. We've just come off a Caribbean one, which was out of Fort Lauderdale and was down to Grand Cayman and Cozumel and through Nassau and back. Over a little short one. But there's like longer ones. There's like 10-day ones. And for us, it's very one, we've already been to most of the islands when we were sailing down there. So it's lovely to come back and see them. So yeah, Florida is a good hub in terms of the Caribbean area. Then you've got the West Coast if you're going to go up and do the Alaskan ones during the summer. Those are quite spectacular. In Europe, a lot of them leave out of like Barcelona or Italy or the Rome area, and they'll do the whole Mediterranean. They'll do Greece, they'll do Turkey, those areas there. And so we've got quite a few of those lined up. And then the other ones are ocean crossings. If you like to do long days at sea, like some people love that. Some people are like, where's the next port? And that you get to know which one is good for you. Like the last one we just brought I think it was the Celebrity Constellation we were on coming from Lisbon. Well, actually we got on in Barcelona, but the passage was from Lisbon directly to Tampa, like 9 days at sea with no ports. And of course, we were speaking on the ships during those days. I absolutely love that part, and and we get up and we go to there's a gym on this cruise ship where there's decks you can walk on, there's saunas, there's food obviously,
Yeah.
and and there's some very high entertainment production shows, that could be on Broadway. They have them every night. There's so much. And the funny thing is, for somebody who hasn't cruised yet, we had maybe a stereotypical concept of what, oh, cruising is just a bunch of people and they're all old, right? That's not necessarily true. There's different cruise ships that cater to different audience. Some are family based, some are, no children, some are for an older demographic. And the other concern we had at the time was, hang on, we've lived on a 40-foot boat and we've been able to go anywhere we wanted and just the two of us. And it was, private islands everywhere. How are we going to enjoy getting on a ship with 2,000 of our new best friends, right? And one of the things that we approach life in is like what you tell your mind is so important. And we made a decision before we went on the first one. The first one we did was in Italy. And we said, okay, whether we like it or not, we're going to love this cruise, because we've come on and we're going to really enjoy it. And the funny thing is, within 24 hours, we didn't have to pretend we loved it. We just loved it. It was wonderful. And I think one of the things, the aspects of cruising that people enjoy is you go to all these different destinations, but you only have to unpack once. You're not hopping on and off trains. You're not going from plane to plane to plane, and that's wonderful, especially the Med. I mean, you wake up in a different country almost every day. It's fantastic.
Yeah, no, that's definitely a selling point. And I love that mindset shift where it isn't, okay, I've never like I don't know, it's cruising and that's something that I learned from Paul when I had him on was
Mhm.
just the different types. And again, it just goes back to what is your travel style? What do you like?
Mhm.
If you want to go to the Mediterranean, want to go to those different places like you just said, that's great because you don't have to worry about maybe going through the Athens airport or the,
Mhm.
Rome airport where it's super busy. You
Mhm.
go in once and you don't have to unpack. And if you like to
Mhm.
go to different destinations, yeah, no, I agree. I'm doing my first all inclusive this year for a friend's wedding, so I'll get a taste of that. So maybe if it's a family trip or something that we need to figure out
Mhm.
how do we do a cruise, I know who I can go back and listen to and also talk
Yeah.
to learn a little bit more.
Yeah, and definitely if you're looking for somebody on the travel side of it, I mean, I know Paul does a great job for his
Hmm.
clients in terms of, trying to match the needs of the person. I think
Yeah.
that's really, really good. Yeah, because ours are kind of mapped out for us and which
Hmm.
ones we're on. But it's another way of eye opening. Now, I will say this in terms of cruising versus traveling to a country and getting involved in the community. You arrive in port for one day in various countries. That only gives you a sense of it. And in some countries, I've seen, especially in smaller islands, if you don't go outside the main port area, sometimes they're built like specifically catered for the cruise ship
Hmm.
passenger. You need to go outside that to actually see it's a part of the country. And for me, obviously, when I have longer time, I try and work in the community, try and volunteer, try and live with a family or something like that, really to get a feel for the country, so that you're more of a traveler, not a tourist.
Yeah.
But I do think the cruise idea is it'll give you one day to give you a flavor. And I know people have done that and then they go, oh yeah, this looks like a place I'd like to come back and really visit and see and
Yeah.
learn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, absolutely. No, that's
So
that's
like
a
a
good
taster.
point. Yeah, yeah. And that way you at least if you're really focused in on the food, the culture,
Hmm.
then but that's a good point because you get to see different places and decide, is this where I want to go? Or
Hmm.
maybe I checked the box off, I saw Santorini and I'm good and I'll go
Yeah.
somewhere else. Like that's
Yeah. Yeah.
but no, I like that mindset. Um, what about I do have a question because this is interesting. I've seen a lot of people starting to go to Antarctica. And I know you have to
Hmm.
take cruise down through the
Hmm.
Drake Passage. I know there's other ways, but have you done that cruise before?
No, not yet. And
Okay.
yeah, that's supposed to be absolutely stunning. Actually, I know somebody who's down in that area, the Falkland Island, in that area at the moment, going down. I do know this that if it's a first time cruiser, and depending on how your sea legs are, I do know that area of the oceans is quite turbulent.
Hmm.
So expect a rocky kind of a passage if you're going down through the Drake Passage.
Yeah.
But if you want something that's a little bit more gentle, then stick with the kind of the seas rather than the big ocean
Yeah.
passages.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That's good advice. I may maybe not do that for the first one.
I don't think I would do it for as my
Yeah.
first one out. You know what I mean?
I've heard
Uh,
stories. I had a guest who was telling us there's been people that like he's known that have gone and just from just waves, everything, have I mean, people sometimes will break bones. There's
mm, mm,
unfortunately been deaths. Like that it can get a little crazy there.
mm,
So just,
mm.
staying safe and making sure. So that's a good piece of advice.
Yeah, but I mean, like for instance, one of the on the big ships like that we're on. When I say big, they're like 22 to 2,400 people versus like the 7,000 passenger ships. Um, One thing I've noticed is that sometimes I feel like I'm on a floating hotel. I don't even notice there's waves at all. You know, I'd have to go out and check that it's still at sea. And again, it's the time of year that you would choose, and it's also the itinerary
Yeah.
in terms of that. If it's your first time out, look for calmer ones, I'd say.
Okay. Good to know. Good to know. So I think last question I always like to ask my guest is what are you most excited for in 2025?
Well, we've got one cruise coming up. It's actually two cruises back to back we're on, is out of Tokyo, and we're doing the entire island of Japan. And that I think we're both neither of us have been to Japan, so we're very excited about that. And it's like each cruise I think is 12 nights. So we'll be gone over to Japan for about a month. And we have this competition between us that who's been to the most amount of countries. And so if it's somewhere that one of us has been, the other one's like, oh, I don't want to go because I've already been there, you know. And Gary's a couple of countries behind me at the moment. He's trying to catch up. Well, this year he's going to actually catch up. He might even pass me out. I don't know. And so, but this one in June, we're mid-June to mid-July, it will be in Japan on the ship. That's on the Constellation Millennium. And we're really both looking forward to that one.
That's awesome. I'm jealous. Japan is on the short list. So you're gonna have to when it you're gonna have to let me know how that goes
Yeah.
and I mean 12 days on each
You
that
could do it. You could
oh
do
no
it.
that
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I want to snowboard. Big into snowboarding, so I want to snowboard in part of Japan and then do everything else. But
Yeah.
I don't know if my fiance would want to spend any of the time snowboarding, so we'll kind
Hmm.
of see. But that's on our short list of next places to go. So I'm definitely looking forward
Wonderful.
to seeing your social media and just
Sure.
seeing everything that you take away from it, and maybe a new
Mm.
book comes out. Who knows?
Mm. Actually, I have one. The last one we were on the Caribbean just last week. I was sitting out there on the back looking over I love sitting on there. Most of them have like the restaurant area where you could be out on deck on the stern. I'm looking out over the wake of the ship, and I went to Gary. I've just had a great idea for a fiction series. You know what I mean?
I
So
love it.
it's love it. Yeah. So I'm excited about that.
Very cool. Well, Niamh, I appreciate you coming on. This was great. I enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to getting a couple of the books because I think just the progression and following them and I'll make sure to share those in the description. But I mean, that's again, these type of stories are great for my audience because the goal is to get people to start traveling or just travel more. And
Hmm.
hearing stories like this, right? It impacts personal growth. It impacts just all different areas of life. And it's truly inspiring to bring people like you on and hear your story. So much appreciated. Thank you again. And for listeners, just so they know, where can they find you, whether it's social media? I know we talked about the books or anywhere else.
Yeah, the main place to get a hold of me is through my website, which is called thewriteronthewater.com. So www.thewriteronthewater.com, spelled just the way it sounds. And you can see all my various, so that'll lead you to any of the social medias that you want to do, but also, you can sign up for the newsletter and we can send that out monthly and they keep people up to date with new writings and stuff coming out. And also our travel experience. And like you, I do a thing where it's like, okay, what's the podcast I'm listening to this month? What's the book I'm reading this month, nonfiction, fiction, and share ideas like that. And I do writing workshops as well, so we have all that in there too.
Awesome.
So
Well,
yeah.
yeah, and listeners, I have the links, so I'll make sure to share those in the description. And really appreciate everyone tuning in this week. If you're new here, make sure you hit the follow button. That way, you don't miss amazing episodes like this that come out weekly. We have expert interviews that come out every Wednesday. We have solo episodes that come out every other week that highlight different destinations I've been to, different strategies and tutorials that really help you travel smarter. And make sure you give us a 5-star review if you think we deserve it. Share it with a friend or family member. That helps us grow the podcast and helps more people travel even more, which is our goal. So tune into next week. Hope everyone has a great week, and we'll talk to you later.